Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Socializing Security. Milou, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Making it through the summer. What about you, Brian?
It is hot as heck around here. So yeah, not only am I feeling trapped in this room during the day, but I feel trapped in the house in the evenings too. So going a little stir crazy if I'm being honest. But such is the world we live in these days. So yeah, let's jump right in. We're going to talk AI this week. I'm just going to put that right up in front of everybody. And this one was my idea, so for once we can blame me for wanting to talk AI, but it is kind of forefront in my world right now. We've got a pretty big mandate to use AI as much as possible, try to work out some of the rough patches in the way that we do our work, and so I'm kind of in there every day doing stuff, finding some good use cases for it, and learning not to completely and totally hate it. But as part of that, I've run into several use cases, several situations where security and AI intersect. And so that's kind of what we want to talk about today. Milou, any stories on your end before we kind of just dive in here when it comes to this topic?
No, I mean, I think it's a good one for us to talk about because I think it's something that we talk a lot about security issues and we talk about AI in general, but I think where those two overlap and come together, there are some amazing innovations that are coming from the ability to use AI, especially in the security space. I think we've talked about some of those already on some prior episodes, but kind of where those two overlap, I think is a great conversation for us to have, making sure that people are aware of how those two different functions can really blend together to support one another and also make sure that there, again, are pretty clear guidelines for each.
Yeah. It's several of the topics on here we have definitely talked about before, not standalone, but as a part of a different conversation because, everything's intersectional. So we're going to kind of combine them all together and be like, hey, when you're thinking AI and security, these are things that will come up. Each of these is going to be an episode on their own potentially too. So this is a little bit of a funnel. I think we're going to put some of these topics through and we'll kind of see where we end up with some of them and maybe we'll dive deeper into some of these topics as well. So I want to start with kind of where one of my more acute situations that I've run into is as we've rolled out AI, we're rolling it out very thoughtfully. I'm in a company that's trying to build a business around AI itself. So we're very thoughtful about everything that we're doing with it. It's very much not a move fast or break things situation because we're in the business of helping companies not do that. And so one of the things that I've run into that really is the root of this conversation for me at least is the fact that defining permissions and ensuring that AI can't get to stuff that it shouldn't, and it's properly, data loss prevention gets most things get funneled through a DLP system so that sensitive data can be extracted from whatever the AI is consuming. And what that results in is some really acute things that I'm trying to work through with our own IT, which is, the permissions that AI has is different than the permissions I have, which is fine. That's probably a good thing. And I know there's some really interesting developments around temporary ACLs and temporary tokens for getting access to things. But right now they've taken more of a security first mindset, which again, I can't complain about, but something as simple as, hey, I have to maintain a bunch of documentation, technical FAQs, technical white papers and things like that. And using AI to enhance our ability to do those, to make them more accurate, to keep them up to date, that kind of thing is really hamstrung by the fact that it simply cannot edit documents that it didn't create in that specific session. And so if it's a document I created a year ago, it can't edit anything. If it's a document that I created in Claude Code, for example, and I go to a Gemini or Claude Cowork or some other agentic type platform, it can't edit the same document that I just created 10 minutes ago with potentially even the same AI backend. Even within a single platform, even within Claude Cowork, for example, if I create it in one session, create a new session to do an update, it can't do it. And it is driving me insane. Because it means everything bottlenecks to, create a document that is a step-by-step guide on how to implement these changes manually. And now I've got a manual effort in the middle of this. Humans in the loop are important, but being able to move forward that kind of stuff. And I'm usually, I've adopted the mindset of you should always ask it what it's going to do before you allow it to do it. And so I usually get a lot of detail. And sometimes those end up in documents that are like, I'm going to change this to this, and I'm going to change this to this. I'm doing that level of effort right now. And so it's a little annoying to me to do that, to have to go through that hoop every single time.
What would you rather it be doing? Letting it create the documents on its own? Or because it sounds like there's like a copying issue here that you're having to then like re-upload the information to start over?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is create a net new document, and then we're still trying as a team trying to feel out how best to deal with this. With links and everything, it's difficult to replace it with a net new document usually, because there's usually a lot of links that link to it that would break if we change that. Depending on the platform that a given company is using to manage these types of documents, it may be easy to just say, hey, drop this in place of that other one. I mean, and just create a new revision of it in that regard. Our platform, I haven't figured out how to do that if it's possible. I could just copy and paste all the contents from one to the other, but that's going to break a bunch of the platform type chips. People mention chips about the dates and things like that, and has a potential of being really screwy when you look at a version over version comparison. So I've kind of found the mindset of I would rather, if I'm going to have to be forced to be in the loop at that point, I want to look at each individual change. So I ask it to give me as simple as possible a copy and paste document so that I can go through that and I can see what's being changed.
Got it. So it sounds like one of the things that you're really hoping for when we're talking about how these kind of things interact is making sure that you just have like guardrails around how it's used and how we're implementing the tool, and then making sure that it's pretty clear for the team to making sure that you guys are doing it the same way. Because it sounds like one team member could be using it one way and the other one a different way.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, we've been doing a lot with skills, so it's becoming more standardized for us across my team as we adopt that mindset. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to complain about there being guardrails in place. I'm security conscious enough that I know why they're there and I understand the need for them. I'm pushing to say, hey, I've got a special use case, and this is something that needs to, if we're truly going to unlock the goals that we have as a company this year to adopt AI and make us all more efficient worker bees, this is something that needs to be unlocked, because this is holding us back to some extent. I've got grand visions of higher levels of automation from, hey, this code just released all the way through all these documents get updated. So we'll see where it goes. This is just kind of the give and take nature of these things, in my opinion. So I'm not really upset about it. It's annoying to me, and sometimes I can get riled up about annoying things. But it is definitely one of those situations where I see the value of the debate, and so let's have the debate on things like this.
Yeah. What are some of the other guardrails that you think we should talk through? I know permissioning. I think you mentioned obviously limiting access for the AI to specific folders or assets within an organization so they don't have access to like an employee's entire drive or something like that. You can add additional approvals within the workflow so that, the AI needs approval for particular functions to, execute on certain actions.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, like making it pretty clear on how team members should be using the tools, I think is another one that a lot of companies might be forgetting to do, of like very clear on how team members are using it so that everyone's kind of using it in a similar way.
Yeah, you don't want to necessarily just give everybody access to an AI tool. Say, hey, here's a paid account for ChatGPT. Go forth and solve all the world's problems, and let it access anything and everything. For us, the concept of an MCP is how you connect your AI tool to another system. And so they've been methodical with which MCPs are getting rolled out. And sometimes they work great. Sometimes they're super duper limited. Some of the MCPs I have only allow me read access to things because they've determined I don't need write access to things, which in some cases is fine. And I 100% agree with it. In other places, it's like, again, this is kind of holding us back, but they obviously had a reason at some level. Hopefully that changes. And, I'm kind of taking the mindset of when I see I know everybody's asking for everything. So as I run into these guardrails, constant approving, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? They've got that tightened pretty tight. So even, code that I have synced locally, and I ask it to search through the code if it can do X, Y, or Z, every find operation, every new find command it wants to run, every grep command it wants to run, is another yes, I have to approve. And we've heard reports of other companies doing this, and that people will use AI to automate AI so that the yeses get automated by different AI. You use agents and subagents, and they're getting smart about that, and doing a human check. Pretty soon we're going to be using CAPTCHA just to be able to use our AI agents. Oh man, that makes me shudder thinking about that. But yeah, there's a lot of those things that can get in the way, and we as users of it have to accept that. We as security professionals need to be mindful about productivity versus locking things down too much, and both sides need to just communicate. When a guardrail does get in the way, document it, share it, say this is the reason why, this is the potential benefits, this is the potential downsides, and have that debate in good fashion.
Yeah, I think a good question to ask when you're thinking about the guardrails is just how much access does the AI actually need to perform its intended task, and limit it to that first. And then as the teams are using it and getting familiar with it, they'll come to the IT teams and security teams asking for additional permissioning, being like, hey, we're limited because of X, Y, and Z. I think that would be the preferred approach, as opposed to giving it access to everything and then pulling it back later when things go wrong.
Yeah, and that's kind of the security is the Department of No thing. Like, if you give somebody something and then try to take it away, it's going to go much, much worse. I mean, just the pure psychology aspect of it. It's better to put it at the limit where you think it, worst case scenario, should be, and then loosen it up as time goes on rather than tighten it down, is definitely the right approach here, because there's been no lack of examples of an AI agent bot going psycho and hallucinating something and then making something up. And then, yeah, I can think of 3 off the top of my head. I'm not even going to bother sharing them because I don't necessarily want to point to any companies, because they're trying to innovate. If they try to fight what the bot did, if you're putting the bot out in front of customers, you got to accept what it's going to do. And that can suck if you don't put the proper guardrails in place.
Yeah, for sure.
So the other area where I think we have a major intersection between security and AI really kind of comes into when a security tool uses AI inside of it. And there's a lot of implications to that. And I think maybe what we'll do is break it down between the different kind of stages, because that usually implies the way different tools use them. But ultimately, they're one of the biggest concerns is the fact that, hey, I'm processing data using it. Is that AI being used to train other models? Is it being used to enhance its knowledge base? Is it sending that to the cloud? Is it a cloud-based model? Is it something I can run locally? Is it a large language model? Is it a small? Like, all of these are valid questions with any use of AI, but probably especially important to understand when you're throwing all of your log files and all the information about your infrastructure to it, and potentially all the information about the holes within your infrastructure are going to go through those tools at some level. Which vulnerabilities you have unresolved are all things that you really need to think about when you adopt, hey, this widget now has AI. And trust me, we've both been at RSA. Is that common at this point?
Yes.
Yes, it is. So, like I said, let's kind of go through the very basic, how we use our tools in security. Monitoring tools. You're grabbing the log files. You're trying to figure out what's going on there. You're looking for the needles that are in the haystack. Again, this is really low level knowledge that you may potentially be using the AI to sort through. Of course, the promise there is way more hay than you'll ever have a chance to look at. There's way more items in that pile, and how are you going to know which ones are the needles? Trying to sort that out is the superpower that we're looking for there. So, Milou, as you've talked to some of your clients, as you've talked to other people, I guess, what are the biggest concerns? And obviously, a lot of potential compliance situations could come into play here. And of course, that's your area of specialty. So I'm kind of curious what you've run into there.
I think you touched on a couple of them already, of making sure that we're super clear on how the AI model is being trained. Where is that data being stored? Who has access to it? How is it being kept secure? Is it being commingled with other customer data and stuff like that? I think is a really important thing. So I would say data governance is an important aspect to understand, of especially where you're starting to put some of your most sensitive logs into a tool to train it for monitoring, making sure too that, you do have humans in the loop as well, of making sure that those decisions are still, coming forward in front of a person that's still making the ultimate decision on that data, I think is really important as well. So I would say absolutely understanding data governance. Where is the data actually going? Understanding what data is flowing into the tool as well. Like, what do you have? Do you need to limit certain things? Being super clear on like what is going into it and what are the outputs. And then again, making sure that you have a human in the loop throughout the approval process as well, to making sure that decisions aren't just happening without any oversight.
Yeah. Just mass investigation of data, trying to move as fast as possible. The next stage ends up being the investigation. So you kind of know something's going on in the environment. Monitoring has discovered there's something. You point it at much narrower. So you're not trying to ingest all the information about everything all at once. Instead, what you're doing is, pointing it at something and trying to process that information. So the kind of stuff that we're doing in, like MDR, XDR, or SIM types tools, where it's going really deep. It's doing the deeper investigation, I guess, is maybe the best way to put that. So it's digging out a lot of information. I mean, it's going to see a lot of, again, this is where you start seeing where your vulnerabilities are at, because that's part of what you're doing, is you're figuring out how somebody got in your environment in the first place. So anything to highlight in that space?
Yeah, I think what's nice about it too is like from the investigation side, what's great about it, right, is like the AI agents and tools can make the entire process significantly quicker, because they're quickly summarizing alerts, correlating events, building timelines, and, identifying related activity across the systems, which again could have taken much longer for a person to do. So there's this advantage of these things are happening significantly faster. But again, there needs to be some understanding of like, how is the AI tool coming to the conclusion that it's reaching, and making sure that the team that's actually analyzing the data understands where those decision points are being made, because otherwise you have something that's making decisions that, the team doesn't fully understand. So I would say that's part of it, that like, yes, the AI tooling can help investigators save a significant amount of time, which is great, especially if you're looking at a serious security incident. That's only good news, but making sure again that the team is super clear on where the information was pulled, how it was understood, and then what are the outputs that they're having now to act on, I think are things that teams need to consider.
Yeah. Again, the theme of have it tell you what it thinks and the reason why it thinks that is super important, because your environment, and there's an element of human intuition that they can come close to right now. The last two sections I'm going to kind of combine, because I think they kind of flow together. So the remediation and the recovery piece. So I combine them together because they're both distinguished by the fact that we're putting AI in charge of doing things now. It's not just about processing information and trying to come to conclusions. It's, hey, go out and delete this file across all the systems. Go and based on the systems that have been breached, start a recovery plan for those. Trying to put the environment back together. And this is super complex. It could get to the point of, hey, I need a clean room to do this, so go create the clean room, and you let AI automate that whole process up in the cloud and start restoring systems in there. Extra dangerous because it's actually doing things. You're allowing it to execute on these things. Again, these guardrails that we talked about, once it goes to execute things, and in this sense, you don't necessarily want it to ask yes every single time, because speed is of the essence, much more than it is when I'm writing a technical FAQ, because now you're losing dollars every minute that you're down is a dollar loss to the business. So what do you see in that space when you pivot the security conversation from investigating and coming to conclusions versus actually going out and doing things?
Yeah, I think the team needs to decide like what is a low risk reversible action that they feel like automation or having the AI take that action automatically like feels okay for the business, versus what are the ones where human approval should be required. I think those are kind of the things. I think, again, during remediation, some of the examples that like an AI could be doing could be resetting passwords, revoking active sessions, disabling accounts, isolating devices, removing files. You mentioned rotating credentials. So there's certain things that the team should measure from like a risk perspective of what they feel comfortable for the AI to go execute, again, to save time, especially in the case of like a widespread outage or a serious security incident. And then which ones still require approval from the security team to make sure that those things are being done properly. Again, ideally, there's a human in the loop. There's oversight throughout the entire process. But there should be some actions that the team feels comfortable letting the AI agent just handle so that they can focus on some of the higher risk items.
Yep. Again, let it tell you what it's going to do, and then verify that that's the thing you want it to do is a good model there. Pivoting a little bit out of AI in the tools we use to AI being the tool we use for security. There's been a lot of ink spilled in this space, so I don't know that we have to dig too terribly deep in this one, but the attackers are using AI to enhance the attacks that they're doing. They're going faster, they're getting deeper, they're being able to process a lot more information, they're able to find a lot more vulnerabilities, which then of course means that on the defense side, we all have to adopt AI to help with the defenses and to be able to watch for those things and to make our EDRs and our firewalls and our DLPs much more efficient and being able to work at the same speed that the attackers are using. And then we introduce Mythos into this whole thing, and everybody's got their own version of it now, which is an LLM designed specifically and trained specifically for finding vulnerabilities in code, going out and trying to discover how to break things. As we record this, there's been stories about AI being able to break out of sandboxes that were designed to keep AI sandboxed, which is just unsurprising at this stage. Like, the ability for ingenuity to break things is kind of the best thing that AI has going for it right now. So there's a lot going on in that space. I feel like that's probably something that we can easily pick off and make an episode on its own. But what are your thoughts there, Milou?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we could talk on that for like 30 minutes just on its own. But yeah, I mean, I think it does follow a lot of what we've already said of just, again, being mindful that you need to have oversight of the thing to make sure that you can contain it so that it doesn't just go rogue.
Yeah. Totally. So the final piece, kind of harkening back to our classic ending of an interview, privacy and security question. But the spin on this one really becomes more about how privacy is intersecting with AI. Again, I think the thing we hear is that privacy and security are interrelated, highly tightly coupled with one another, but not the same thing. And so one of the guardrails that I kind of flicked at earlier ends up being in that data loss prevention space and being able to use anonymizing data, or one thing that a lot of people are using AI for is being able to create synthetic data for their test and dev environments, because we become all acutely aware of the fact, hopefully, that you shouldn't just restore your production system into your development environment and start going. As a former developer myself decades ago, that is what I used to do because it was the most real world data I could possibly get. And that's just doesn't fly these days. That is malfeasance. And I would support a lawsuit that says that is malfeasance at that point, because you generally just don't have the same guardrails in place to protect that data. And so in order to maintain privacy in those places, you've got to make sure that you're properly redacting data. And this is a guardrail I bump into on a daily basis, it feels like these days too, is that I couldn't, there's something there, but I just can't see it. It got stripped out for some reason. Oh, well, yeah, the DLP is doing its job, I guess, because it took that person's name out. That really wasn't sensitive data, but apparently it's being very conservative. So, Milou, I don't see you disagreeing with that approach or that it being all that much different than what we talked about earlier in the conversation with guardrails, but I'm sure you've got a unique perspective on that.
Yeah, I think from a privacy perspective, it's very much like about data minimization. Obviously, as you had mentioned, you should be using customer data in your test environments. Like, you should not be testing with customer data. That has definitely changed over the last couple of years. Using an AI tool to create synthetic data based off of the parameters that your team is using, I think, is a great way to do that. But from a personal privacy perspective, again, it comes down to data minimization for the most part, of like, what personal data is being used? Why is it needed? Is this aligned with the original purpose for what the data was collected for? Is this like totally different and you need to go capture new consent from those users to use that data in that particular way? And understanding, is the data transferring? Does it align with your team's privacy policy? Ultimately, really comes down to it, and making sure that the team isn't using the data in like a totally different way than how it was intended. I think for the most part, it comes down really to data minimization on the privacy side.
As it always does. It's just that AI has a special, unique ability of capturing data and processing it quicker than anybody can ever think, which is also a superpower. So what are you going to do? We hope that Superman will use his powers for good, but what if he doesn't? So yeah, a lot to cover there. And always evolving, just like anything AI is. So I'll definitely touch on some of these in a little bit more depth. But I think that's a good conversation for today. Milou, what do you think?
Yeah, agreed.
Cool. Well, let's call it there. We thank you all for joining us. Happy to hear any feedback you have on this. If any of these topics going deeper, particularly acute for you, and you want us to do it sooner rather than later, then let us know. If you know somebody that would be an expert in that field, we'd love to get that advice as well. So info@socializingsecurity.com. We'd love to hear that. And otherwise, we'll talk to you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.